So here's a fun video. Dungeon Crawler Carl is a fantasy series by Matt Dinneman. It began in 2020 and it already has 6 full-length novels. It has been growing quite a bit in popularity recently. A lot of people have been jumping on this series, and not wanting to be a loser, I decided to check it out as well. Now, going into it, I did know a few things. I knew that it was a lit RPG, a subgenre of fantasy, where things are sort of like a simulated video game or tabletop game where the characters are going through this fantasy setting. They're leveling up, collecting items for their inventory. A lot of video game type mechanics, and they are, of course, progressively getting stronger as they progress through whatever they're trying to do. It's a genre I'm not actually that familiar with, despite my background with manga. I didn't really mess around with that type of stuff, because the stuff I did try never really grabbed me. But people have been going absolutely crazy about Carl, about how funny it is, how fun and exciting, just calling it a wonderfully entertaining adventure. And after reading the first book, people are absolutely right. However, there is one element of this book that I wasn't really expecting, and that's how disturbing it was, to the point where this almost felt like a horror novel in disguise. So let's get into that, talk about what the story's about, and why it kinda made me feel a bit weird. So our story follows Carl, a pretty normal dude who's just hanging out one night. And after his cat Donut escapes the house and he has to run outside to catch her, the entire world collapses. Now what I mean by this is that every single structure on the planet is instantaneously crushed to the ground. So every single person who was indoors at this moment is now dead. Billions of people are gone. Why did this happen? Well, it's because Earth is the new host of Dungeon Crawler World, an intergalactic reality TV show in which a planet is chosen to be converted into a dungeon. All survivors of the collapse on that planet are then invited into the dungeon to see how far they can get. I believe there are 18 floors, and whoever makes it to the end gets control of the entire planet. So now, standing in a complete wasteland with nowhere to go, Carl decides to take Donut and enter the dungeon to see what it's all about. God, that is such a brutal way to start your series, man. Just imagine the scenario. Like, all of a sudden, everything you know is gone. In an instant. No one sees it coming. No one could have done anything to stop it. Billions of people are dead, and it's because of a reality show. It's some heavy stuff for sure, but thankfully you aren't really hung up on it too much because the book moves you along. Carl enters the dungeon, which is basically a simulated video game. He learns how to use his inventory, meets some friendly NPCs, gets to talk to his AI companion. The cat Donut also becomes a registered player and gains the ability to speak, and she is quite a character with quite a few opinions. He learns the rules, learns how to kill monsters, learns about safe zones, leveling up. The first few floors of the dungeon are really meant to sort of like ease people into it. So some of the more advanced stuff, like, allocating skill points and stuff, doesn't really happen yet. He's just sort of trying to make his way through and survive. And like a good video game, the progression in here is very addicting. The further he goes, the more abilities that he unlocks, the more things he learns, the more he levels up, becomes stronger. It's great stuff, and of course he also learns a bit more about what's going on, like what the state of the universe is in right now. It is, of course, quite a shock to him that this is even happening. And it is very funny. This is a book with a very dark sense of humor, but it's also really silly. There are a lot of running gags, humorous characters, like Carl's AI that he talks to is pretty insane. Like, he scanned and analyzed all of human civilization, so he tries to make references and jokes about human things, and they come across as, very awkward and odd, but that was always fun to see. Carl is very deadpan and stoic and doesn't really fit with, the tone of these other characters, which makes it very amusing. And Donut, or I should say Princess Donut, she is very obsessed with being a star and not really comprehending, what actually happened to the Earth because she's a cat. The idea of being on the TV is very exciting to her. And of course, as Carl travels deeper in the dungeon, he starts to meet other humans who are also, forced inside. And this is where I think more of the horror elements creep back in. Because at this point, you're having a good time. You're laughing. It was very easy to forget about, like, this unspeakable horror that just happened. We are constantly seeing the player count of the game, so basically all of the humans still alive on Earth, getting smaller and smaller, as it establishes that, you know, the dungeon is not a safe place. It's very easy to die, and a lot of people are going to die because a lot of people are not jacked like Carl. But because that is sort of only represented as a number, you don't really feel the weight of it until a bit later. The way the book is set up, like, it doesn't really let your mind wander too much, because you're always moving forward. You know, you're not really thinking about, like, other scenarios, other people, you know, during the collapse, like what they went through, what they had to do. So it kind of hits you like a truck when Carl runs into a giant group of elderly who just happen to be outside because the fire alarm on their retirement home had gone off. So here you just have tons of old people who are physically, you know, not up to the standard that the dungeon requires, and you have younger people trying to take care of them. But a lot of them have dementia, they're very confused, they don't know what's going on. And the situation is kind of hellish and horrifying. That's when the book impressed me because, you know, it doesn't really take these things lightly. You know, it sort of explores what these characters are feeling and, you know, the actual dread that's happening right here. And not only is it a scary situation, but it's also very sad because you know that these people are doomed. Like, the dungeon is not going to go easy on them. They are going to die. And it is all being broadcast to trillions of people across the galaxy. And of course, as most post-apocalyptic stories go, not all of the survivors are necessarily good guys. So there are some other characters too who, you know, might not have the best of intentions, throwing wrenches in Carl's plans. And what are Carl's plans? Well, there's not much he can really do besides keep progressing in the dungeon. Even by at this point, he found out that pretty much no one has ever beaten the dungeon and that he's kind of screwed. But that's life, I guess. You know, you just keep shoveling the shit until you die. Yeah. But progress is not impossible, and a big advantage the players have is actually social media. You see, while this is a reality show being broadcast live, the more likable you make yourself will get you more fans. The more fans you get will have people, you know, throwing you a boon every once in a while. It's very Hunger Games in that sense, and yeah, it's about as morbid here as it is there. Maybe more so here. Yeah. What I really like about the world building in this story is that you can tell that more stuff is going on behind the scenes. It is very clear that this series is going to expand further than just what we think it is right now. And I'm very excited to read more because, you know, so far, this book was a riot. Because yes, while some of the elements of this book did disturb me greatly and I have not stopped thinking about them, it is balanced very well by an exciting pace, a great sense of humor that doesn't really take away from any of the serious stuff going on. As someone who plays a lot of video games, I really enjoyed how a lot of those elements, you know, were present in the story and how they sort of just become part of reality. And the book ended with a nice climax, but I was more excited by the ending, which was a bit of a tease of what is to come as Carl and Donut descend further into the dungeon. I believe this series is planned to be 10 books, and they get quite long, so I'm definitely going to keep going through them, and I have to mention the audiobook here. It's absolutely excellent. It's one of the best audiobooks I've ever heard, period. The narrator does an absolutely fantastic job with all of the voices. Yeah, just excellent stuff. Would highly recommend listening to this series. And aside from that, I really recommend the series to pretty much everyone, like if you're into video games, tabletop stuff. I don't really know if someone outside of that realm will get much out of this, because a lot of the book is very much rooted in that culture. But yeah, if you're into that stuff, looking for a fun time, and don't mind a bit of existential dread to keep you up at night, Dungeon Crawler Carl is a banger, 4 stars, lots of potential to grow, and I will be updating you on my thoughts as I read more. So with that, thank you all so much for watching, and I don't, what are we doing next? I